In the days of technology, we get flooded with more information than ever before, but we are just remembering a tiny bit of it. And it's no wonder, because our brain kept the same since centuries, while our technology develops all the time. Luckily for us, the same technology that overwhelms us with information can also help us remembering it. And in his book, Tiargo Forte describes us how to do so using his second brain method. But first things first, what is a second brain? Basically said, a second brain is everything you write down, or rather said, your notes, like you may already use them. And that can be a note from every source you can think of, like a book, an article, a podcast, even photos or videos. And all this leads to your personal knowledge collection. And what a second brain is for, is to remember and to organize your notes so you can access them from everywhere and retrieve them everywhere you are, and you don't have to rely on your biological primitive brain anymore. Instead, you can feel relieved by knowing you have a trustful, reliable system that keeps track of your notes. But now let's dive into the interesting part on how to actually build the second brain. And as I mentioned before, it all starts with the simple act of writing things down. And the method that Tiargo proposes to use is called the CODE method, which stands for capture, organize, distill and express. So what exactly does capture mean? Capture means that you write down everything that resonates, but you have to decide whether it's noteworthy or not, because if it's not, then it could quickly get overwhelming, and that's what we're trying to avoid. If you're not exactly sure which information to keep, then Tiargo provides us a few questions we can ask ourselves. The first question would be, does it inspire me? Because if it does, then definitely hit save, because you can't Google your own feelings of inspiration like you can do it with resources, for example. The second question would be, is it useful? I think I don't have to explain that much about it. If it's useful to you for a project or whatever you have going on right now, then also hit save. Is it personal? Like a thought that occurred to yourself? I personally have a lot of great thoughts while lying in my bed, and that's what I also love, to have a HomePod next to my bed, so whenever I have a thought going on in my head, I can just tell Siri to simply take a note. And the last question would be, is it surprising? Because Tiargo argues that if it's not at least just a little bit surprising, then at some point you already knew it. But let's turn to our second action of the CODE method on how to organize your notes. And here comes another system into play called the para system, which tells us to sort our notes into projects, area, resources, and archives. So whenever you have a note or a resource that might help you on the project you're working on right now, then you can simply create a subfolder inside of your projects folder, and there you can just collect all your files that might be helpful, and you have a collective of all your files you might need. Like I did, for example, while reading the book I'm talking about right now. Every time something occurred to me that could already be useful for my video script, I simply took a note using the quick note feature on my iPad and sorted it afterwards in my project folder, as well as a summary of the entire book. The note-taking app I personally use to combine all of those notes is Notion, by the way. The second space, called area, is everything you might need for long-term use. For example, for doing your taxes. I also like to collect like book summaries there, or just knowledge I want to keep in mind, although it doesn't belong to any specific project. The resource ordner, you can treat it quite similar to the projects folder, but the main difference here is that it's meant to be for upcoming projects, or simply said, projects in the future. Because if you already know you want to do this project somewhere in the future, and you already have a collection of material that might help you, then it's a lot easier to start. And last but not least, we have the archive folder. And what the archive folder does, sorry for the pronunciation by the way, is to replicate the bin, like you might already know it from every computer. But an important difference from the normal bin is that you don't lose any data. So whenever you finish the project or just put it on ice, you can just simply drag it into your archive, and if you want, you can reopen it somewhere in the future if you're willing to proceed to your project, but otherwise it just stays in the archive and is safe for whenever you want to use it. And in this way you don't have to be afraid of losing any data, but at the same time you can get rid of any files that buzzering you, that are overwhelming to you in the other 3 folders. And if you're not sure about where a file or a note or whatever you have, to which folder it belongs to, then just ask yourself this simple question: where will this piece of information be useful the soonest? So that's everything you need to know about organizing your notes. Let's move on to the still. And what the still means is that you break down your information to the tiniest way possible. For example, by marking a few passages that you have on an article, just like we know it from school. And the purpose of this is that you can easily retrieve the most important aspects of a text or whatever you might have within seconds and without spending any energy in it. Once we've done that, we should come to the point of expressing our knowledge, because Tiargo argues that as long as we don't share our knowledge to each other, it's pointless. So whatever knowledge you have, just talk to a friend or family member, whatever you like, and just share your knowledge. And that's, by the way, what I'm doing with this video right now. I hope Tiargo would be proud of me. So guys, there it is. That's our method to build a second brain. But there are still some questions left. Beginning with how to deal with long texts like a book or an article. To, for example, break down a book to its tiniest form possible, we of course need to sum it up first. To do this, we can once again mark the important passages of the book, and it's beneficial if you do it while reading the book, not just afterwards. And of course you can use the same questions we used before to decide whether information is important or not. I personally prefer to read books on my iPad on the pre-installed Apple Books app, because there you can easily mark passages using the Apple Pencil, and doing this you already get a list of all your highlighted sections, and that's pretty handy if you ask me. But of course you can use any platform you prefer to use for reading. There are a lot of EPUB reader options out there, whether it's the Play Store or the App Store, it doesn't matter. And you can of course also use like a Kindle or even a physical book. So now that you have your summary, you can either stick to it or just do the same exact process once again. But this time do it with your summary you did before. So you basically do a summary of the summary. And once again, mark down the most important aspects, but this time I personally prefer to just mark like keywords instead of entire phrases, because that gives us an even better overview about our text. What we end up with is a very compact form of text that you can go through within seconds, and that is as handy as all your other notes you've taken. And if you want it even clearer, then you can also add a short summarize based on the thoughts you still remember from the text, because Tiargo argues that those are the most important ones that you can have. So feel free to do this extra step. For my taste, it's a bit exaggerating. I go with the keywords I marked from the second summary. So now that we have our system complete, it's the question of which app to use. And of course I don't know every app out there, so there might be a good app or even a perfect app that I don't know. I can just give you my opinions, my recommendations of apps I'm using right now. Let's start with Notion. Notion is the app where I combine all my notes, and to my opinion is the most important one, because that's also the app where I set up my para system and where I sort every note according to projects, area, resources and archive. And the benefits of Notion are that it's at first available on every platform you can think of. And in addition to that, as long as you don't use it for commercial but private reasons, it's completely free, and it comes with the sync option, so it's always synced between all your devices. For daily notes, I just use the pre-installed Apple Notes app, and once a week I transform all my notes to Notion to properly sort them into the para system. And what I really like about Apple Notes is that it's integrated into our Apple ecosystem, so I can easily, as I mentioned before, use Siri, for example, using the HomePod just to tell her taking a note from me, or just using the quick note option on the iPad by simply swiping with the finger from your lower right corner up to the middle of the screen. And I'm of course aware of Apple Notes being just available for Apple devices, but of course you can use every other option. As an ebook reader, I already mentioned Apple Books to be my personal choice of ebook reader. When it comes to articles, I found Instapaper to be a very useful app, but it comes with a downside that not might affect everyone, but on the iPad you're so far unable to mark specific sections of the text, just like you can do it, for example, on Apple Books. And finally, to save Instagram posts, I use an app called InstaSaver, but there are a ton of other apps out there in the App Store doing the exact same thing. And what I do after saving an Instagram post is that I collect them inside of an inbox folder, and this inbox folder is located on my desktop and not in any note-taking app. But now you can find the exact same folders on my desktop that are already set up in Notion, and once a week I go through my inbox folder and just put every file to the folder it belongs to. In Notion, however, I don't have such a thing as an inbox folder, but there I somehow treat my Apple Notes app just similar to an inbox folder. And what also might be helpful is to consider about using a cloud storage system, so you can access every file wherever you are on whatever place or whatever time you are there. And again, if you're using the Apple ecosystem, I would highly recommend to use iCloud, because there you can simply synchronize your desktop and documents to all your devices, and that's pretty helpful. But of course, again, there are a lot of other cloud storage systems out there, like OneDrive, Dropbox, or whatever you prefer. It's up to you what you want to use. So to come to a conclusion, I find the second brain method to be a very helpful method to organize your notes and keeping track of them. But on the same side, I want to mention, and that's just my personal opinion, that it can be definitely useful to learn things by heart. Because as I see it, one of the most important aspects our brain has to offer is not just the simple act of remembering things, but to combine those information and to create correlations between them. And that's of course just not possible with our second brain that it is with our first biological brain. So guys, with that said, don't use your second brain to replace your brain, but to support it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If that's the case, please leave me a like, and I can highly recommend checking out the book How to Build a Second Brain by Tiargo Forte, because there you get a lot more information that you just do from this video. So I can just recommend it to you. I hope I will see you in the next video. Catch you then.